I have one big problem with the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and the problem is contrast. There is a huge contrast between Rocket's pretty dark and emotional backstory and the rest of the movie. After watching the movie, I am honestly glad that we're not getting more Guardians of the Galaxy movies by James Gunn. I like these movies more than almost anything else that the machine called the MCU managed to produce in 15 years since 2008. Gunn's movies always had more style, energy and passion than the rest of the MCU combined. This is why the first Guardians of the Galaxy is perhaps my favorite MCU movie, even though it's been almost 9 years. However, I feel like Gunn is genuinely tired of working with Disney. Who isn't, let's be honest. The guy needs room for his creative vision to breathe, and Disney has an alarming tendency to smother any creative vision in order to make movies as formulaic as possible. The MCU formula has been working well for many years. Yes, their recent movies were not really good. I still cannot decide which movie is the worst, Thor: Love and Thunder or Ant-Man: Quantumania. Probably the latter after all. But despite being mostly disappointing, MCU movies still make huge sums of precious dollars. The only movie that actually flopped was Ant-Man: Quantumania, but that's an exception, not the rule. And to be fair, however, Ant-Man didn't really flop but underperformed. It made less than $500 million in almost 3 months. I am pretty sure that the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is gonna make some good cash, especially considering that Disney's favorite country, China, is involved. But let us return to the point that I was trying to make. Gunn doesn't wanna make MCU movies anymore. I cannot help but compare this new Guardians of the Galaxy movie with Gunn's DCU projects, namely the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker show. Both projects felt like Gunn was having so much fun with them. Both were R-rated and allowed themselves more violence and swearing that you would see in a regular comic book movie. Even humor worked much better. In Guardians of the Galaxy, it is clear how much Gunn was holding himself back. There was blood, but mostly green alien blood. It doesn't look like human blood, therefore it's okay. Gamora literally slays an alien character in a very gruesome way, but the blood isn't red, so you can bring all your loved ones from your children to your grandparents into the theater and no one's gonna get scared or feel discomforted. Disney cares for family-friendly entertainment after all. It is probably for the best that Gunn will be working on remaking the DCU now, after it collapsed miserably. This kinda bad for the MCU though, since they lost one of their most creative directors. At the beginning of this video, I was talking about contrast. I thought the movie was okay overall, nothing really special, nothing of what we haven't seen before. But flashbacks of Rocket's pretty tragic past were absolutely delicious. From beginning to start, Rocket's backstory felt like a more cohesive story than everything else. I genuinely felt for Rocket and all his friends who were used for experiments. There is a big missed opportunity in my opinion. Rocket's story could have been its own movie. If only Disney wasn't so terrified of any experiments, pardon this unintentional pen, that slipped somehow into the script. I think Rocket the movie would have been a totally interesting idea. We could learn much more about High Evolutionary and the Counter-Earth that he created. This movie about Rocket could have led us into Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The movie about Rocket could have also explored body horror elements, if that's not too much for Disney. But I think it is. As for Guardians of the Galaxy, Rocket's backstory takes about half an hour, maybe a little more than half an hour. So this time could have been comfortably spent on Adam Warlock instead. Adam Warlock was teased like 10 years ago, but actually 6, so his appearance in the MCU just had to be epic. And it wasn't satisfying enough, unfortunately. I like Will Poulter and I think he was a fairly decent choice for this role. The guy is charismatic enough to be a good villain or an anti-hero depending on how to use him in the story. We don't learn anything about his defect from the movie, we don't know anything about how he was created. Also a strange episode, his so-called mother probably died on that Counter-Earth planet. We'll never see her again after the plot moves from the Counter-Earth to nowhere. We don't see Adam raging over her death either. I suspect that she might have survived somehow and will return again, but I just don't see the point in it, to be honest. She's not that important of a character anyway. I understand why Disney would wanna bring Wanda back, she's an Avenger after all, or at least she was. By the way, for a split second the movie actually made me believe that Rocket would die, but it obviously didn't happen, and I'm not really complaining about it. The scene where he realized that he's a raccoon and accepts himself as Rocket Raccoon was really wholesome. As for Adam Warlock, his sudden redemption arc felt very rushed. His whole character arc in general was oversimplified to just this. He was released from his mechanical cocoon or whatever it's called too early. He's got defects, he's not the perfect machine he was made to be. He was not even able to bring Rocket to high evolutionary and had to retreat from nowhere. And Warlock suffers from being ridiculed by others for his defects, especially by high evolutionary. However, the movie doesn't focus on Adam's emotional suffering and dilemma. He's clearly not a bad guy, but he was made to obey and do whatever his masters command him to do. There actually could have been an interesting parallel between Adam and Rocket. As I said already, Rocket and his backstory could be a separate movie, while Guardians of the Galaxy could focus on Adam Warlock. Or maybe a movie could combine everything. It's 2.5 hours after all, pretty comfortable runtime to work with, even if your story contains so many different plot elements. Also, is it just me, or is the humor in Guardians of the Galaxy movies getting progressively worse? I remember the first movie being cleverly funny, especially compared to other blockbusters. In Volume 3, however, most jokes felt out of place or even embarrassing. I don't know, maybe the humor is worse now, or maybe because I have matured since 2014. I should probably try to rewatch older movies sometime to see if I still enjoy them as much as I used to. But the answer is probably gonna disappoint me. Overall, the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was a pretty entertaining movie. It had some very emotional strong moments as well as good performances, especially by Will Poulter, whose character was underwhelming, but the actor did his best with what Gunn and his writers prepared for him. CGI had its flaws, though it didn't look nearly as bad as Ant-Man Quantumania, where CGI quality hit rock bottom. My only hope for the future of the MCU is that Disney, after 2 years, came to realize that they should focus on quality rather than sheer quantity. Ant-Man 3 should serve as a reminder that people get tired of bad content eventually. Despite having Kang the Conqueror, Ant-Man 3 could not bring enough people to theaters. This is one of the reasons why the next MCU movie, Marvels, was postponed from July to November, as well as other projects including Disney Plus shows. They also moved forward. I recently read an interesting news article that the writers of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness didn't even watch the ending of WandaVision, so this should probably explain why continuity between these two projects was so poor, and why Sam Raimi's movie almost entirely undermined Wanda's character development in the show. So, not just viewers, even writers these days cannot catch up with everything that's being released. This is definitely a sign that Disney should slow down and take a deep breath. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, despite its problems, was still a decent end to this current team. I hope James Gunn will be able to have more creative freedom with his DC projects. I really do.